In a small town in Italy, there stood a grand old church. That church had been a center of worship for centuries, a place where prayers were offered and sacred hymns echoed every week. But that day, something unimaginable was about to happen. Sister Maria Lucia, a nun known for her devotion, stood at the pulpit with trembling hands. Her face was pale, her eyes widened, as if she had just witnessed something that shook her soul. In her hands was not the Bible she usually read, but a book she had unexpectedly discovered, the Qur'an. The book glowed golden under the candlelight of the church. The congregation sat in silence, staring in wonder, as if time itself had stopped. With a trembling voice, Sister Maria turned page after page until her eyes fell upon a verse that left her astonished. Tears streamed down her face as she read the verse aloud, though her accent was still unfamiliar. Indeed, the religion in the sight of Allah is Islam. Qur'an, Surah Al-Imran, verse 19. The moment those words left her lips, the entire church fell into silence. It was as if the air thickened, and the hearts of everyone present were pierced by an undeniable truth. The congregation, who had only come for their weekly prayers, now felt their chests tremble. A middle-aged man in the front row, who had been a faithful member for decades, suddenly stood and clutched his chest. With a hoarse voice, he said, "Why do these words feel so true? It's as if something is whispering within my heart, that this is the answer I have been searching for all along." Sister Maria fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. The congregation panicked. Some tried to calm her, but she spoke with a voice full of conviction. "All this time I have searched, devoted, prayed, yet my heart remained empty. And now, with just one verse, I have found a truth I cannot deny." The atmosphere grew even more dramatic when a young member of the congregation raised his hand to the sky and cried out, "If this is truly the word of God, then I bear witness, there is no God but Allah." Those words shocked the entire church, yet instead of rejecting them, many felt the same stirring in their hearts. One by one, members of the congregation stood, tears falling, raising their index fingers to the sky as if affirming the oneness of God. Crying filled the hall. Prayers turned into echoes of the Shahada. Those who had once been hesitant now recited it, guided by a young imam who happened to be present at the church as a guest. In mere minutes, an event that seemed impossible in the eyes of the world became reality. Everyone in that church, from the nun to the congregation, embraced Islam. Sister Maria, now called Mariam, stood with a radiant face. She gazed at the holy book in her hands and declared loudly, "One verse was enough to turn my heart." If just one verse is this powerful, what about the entire book? Cries of takbir echoed through the church, now transformed into an impromptu mosque. The sound of Allahu Akbar filled the hall, once adorned only with bells and hymns. That day, a new history was written. One verse of the Qur'an shook the heart of a nun, and an entire church embraced Islam. News of what had happened in the old church spread quickly. Within hours, the story of a whole church embracing Islam became the talk of the entire city. Many flocked to the church out of curiosity. Could it really be true that the nun and the congregation had changed their faith because of just one verse? Outside the church, dozens gathered. Some stared in disbelief, some in anger, but many felt their hearts tremble, yearning to know what had truly happened. Inside the church, the atmosphere was completely transformed. The bells that once rang were now silent. The great cross on the altar was looked upon with different eyes, as if it no longer held power. What filled the air instead were whispers of takbir, and the Shahada repeated over and over by those who had just found peace in their hearts. Sister Maria, now Mariam, sat on the floor with the holy book in her lap. The congregation surrounded her as if she were the center of light. With a hoarse voice from weeping, she said, "For decades I have served, prayed endlessly, yet there was always an emptiness in my heart that was never filled. I read the gospel, I memorized prayers, but my nights remained dark. But when I read this one verse, the walls of my heart crumbled. I feel I have finally found home. The congregation sobbed. An elderly woman, nearly a century old, held Mariam's hand and said, "My child, I have been waiting for this truth all my life. I do not want to close my eyes before truly knowing Allah. Guide me, teach me." Tears broke once more. Mariam embraced the old woman, then turned to the young imam, who still stood at the altar. The imam stepped forward with firm strides and declared loudly, "Oh, my brothers and sisters, this is no coincidence. Allah has chosen you to witness His truth today. If one verse is enough to open your hearts, imagine how your lives will be transformed with the entire Qur'an." The cries of Allahu Akbar resounded once more. The congregation, who had been hesitant, now bowed, weeping, and slowly raised their index fingers to the sky, a sign of the oneness of Allah. That night, the church that was usually dark was now filled with candlelight, yet that light was nothing compared to the light of faith igniting in their hearts. They sat together, listening to the recitation of more verses from the Qur'an by the Imam, and each verse felt as though it erased old wounds, replacing anxiety with tranquility. Some cried out in awe, "Why are we only hearing this now? Why has this truth been hidden from us for so long?" Mariam bowed her head, holding back tears. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. There would be resistance, there would be ridicule, but her faith was firm. She gazed at the congregation, now her brothers and sisters in Islam, and whispered, "We may lose this church, but we have found paradise." The next day, local media arrived. Reporters pointed microphones at them, demanding explanations. But none of the congregation flinched. They only gave one short, certain answer. "We have found the truth. We have found Islam." The news shook Italy. It was said that the Pope in the Vatican was furious, while Catholics in many cities were bewildered. But no one could deny the fact that an entire church had indeed changed course, all because of one verse. And from that day on, the old church was renamed. The cross was taken down, replaced with a calligraphy inscription of Allah Akbar. The bells no longer rang, but the adhan was called for the first time in that place. That historic day was remembered by thousands, the day when one verse of the Qur'an shocked a nun, and the light of Islam illuminated an entire church. That day became a turning point. What began with one verse became an unstoppable wave of change. The old church, once a symbol of spiritual silence, now echoed with the recitation of the Qur'an. Sister Maria, or Mariam, stood at the door of the new mosque. Her face shone with a serenity she had never felt before. She knew the road ahead was full of trials. There would be slander, threats, even exile. But her heart was steadfast. She whispered softly in her prayer, "O Allah, you have turned my heart with one verse. So strengthen my steps to preserve this light until the end of my life." The congregation, now her brothers and sisters in faith, stood by her side. They no longer saw themselves as nuns or church members, but as one new family in Islam. And that night, when the adhan was called for the first time from the church that had become a mosque, the entire city fell silent. The sound pierced the sky, entering the hearts of all who heard it. Some rejected it, some raged, some refused to believe, but the light of guidance had already ignited the flame in the hearts of the chosen. And that light, once kindled, could never be extinguished. One verse had shaken the heart of a nun. One church had found the truth. And from that single point, the light of Islam began to spread, illuminating Europe with a light that could never be put out. In the heart of Europe, precisely in Italy, a land long known for centuries as the center of the Catholic faith and home to the Vatican, an extraordinary event took place. This event not only shocked the Italian society, but also shook the world. Thousands of nuns who had dedicated their lives behind the monastery walls decided to embrace Islam. At first, this story began with restlessness of the heart. Many of them had lived for years in the silence of prayer, isolating themselves from the noise of the outside world. They sought tranquility, peace, and answers to the deepest questions about God, life, and the purpose of their existence. Yet, over time, they felt that something was missing. They read the Holy Scriptures every day, yet the great questions remained unanswered. Why must the Almighty God be manifested in human form? Why must original sin be carried by every child born into the world? And why, despite praying for so many years, did their hearts still feel an unrest that could not be healed? In the silence of the convent, some nuns secretly began to open new horizons. They read literature about other religions, especially Islam. At first, all of this was done in secrecy, afraid of being considered apostates or unfaithful to their sacred calling. Yet, behind those silent walls, they discovered verses of the Qur'an that touched their hearts. Say, He is Allah, the one and only, Allah, the eternal refuge. He neither begets nor is born, and there is none comparable to Him. Qur'an Surah Al-Ikhlas, 1-4, 2. Those verses were so simple, yet so profound. Not convoluted, not confusing, not against reason. One by one, the nuns began to feel that Islam gave the answers they had long been seeking. Islam presented an image of God so pure, without intermediaries, without incarnation into creatures, without hierarchy. They found beauty in the words, La ilaha illallah. There is no God but Allah. The words were simple, yet they struck their hearts like lightning, awakening them from a long slumber. At first, only a handful of nuns were interested. They secretly discussed, exchanged translated copies of the Qur'an, listened to Qur'anic recitations through hidden phones, and even prayed in Islamic prostration inside their small rooms without anyone knowing. Yet the peace they felt was so powerful that it could no longer be hidden. The whispers of the heart grew louder, eventually moving many other nuns to seek as well. From 10, it became hundreds. From hundreds, it became thousands. A turning point came when a Muslim professor from the University of Rome was invited to give an academic lecture on comparative religion. In that forum, he gently explained the concept of Tawheed, about the prophets honored in both Islam and Christianity, and about Mary, the holy figure who even has an entire surah dedicated to her in the Qur'an. Many nuns wept in emotion as they listened. They realized for the first time that Mary, the figure they had revered since childhood, was actually honored more highly in Islam than in their own faith. That night, many nuns cried until late. Tears fell not out of sadness, but out of joy, that God had finally led them to the pure truth. The climax came on a bright morning in a large hall outside Rome, where thousands of nuns gathered. They stood in their long white garments that had always been a symbol of devotion. But that day, their faces radiated a different light. There was relief, peace, and happiness that could not be described in words. An imam stood before them, his voice trembling as he led the declaration of faith. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. In unison, thousands of nuns recited those words. Tears burst forth, crying of joy echoed throughout the hall. They were no longer nuns, they were now Muslim sisters. Some immediately removed the crosses from their necks, replacing them with simple veils provided by the organizers. Some kissed the Qur'an for the first time with deep love. Others prostrated for a long time on the floor, experiencing the true peace they had never felt in their entire lives. The news spread quickly, shaking Italy and even the whole of Europe. International media covered it. Church leaders were left bewildered, while Muslims across the world fell into prostration of gratitude. Many could not believe. How could the land that was the heart of Catholicism give birth to thousands of converts from among nuns? Yet the reality could not be denied. One of them said in a trembling voice during an interview, "For decades I searched for God, but only today do I truly feel His closeness. Islam is not just a religion, but a way of life that truly brings peace to my heart." Now, thousands of former nuns live as Muslim women. They are learning to read the Qur'an, studying Arabic, and beginning to wear the hijab with pride. Many have become drivers of dawah, spreading their stories so that more people may come to know Islam. From the silence of the convent, they have now discovered a new world full of light. From empty prayers, they have found sincere prostration. From endless restlessness, they have found true tranquility. And it all began with one noble statement: La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. The story of thousands of Italian nuns who found guidance is living proof that the light of truth cannot be blocked by walls, traditions, or even centuries of history. Guidance is the absolute right of Allah, and He grants it to whomever He wills. What happened in Italy is not merely a social phenomenon or a historical event, but a sign that Islam will continue to shine even in the most unexpected places. From behind the silent prayers of the nuns, Allah revealed the straight path. From restless hearts, unwavering faith was born. That day, the world witnessed how thousands of souls surrendered themselves completely to Allah. They left behind doubts, abandoned confusion, and attained true happiness. And now, from Italy, the center of the Catholic world, resounds the same words once proclaimed by the Prophet and his companions 14 centuries ago: La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. Words that unite, that bring peace, and that save. Words that will never fade, even as the ages continue to pass.